Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to share my thoughts on why the Conservatives seem to continue to get more than twice as much in donations as Reform UK. Now, you may imagine donating to the Tories is fruitless, as they're clearly not forming a government anytime soon, whereas Reform UK might have a realistic chance and could be in the market for quid pro quo returns on donations. Well, let's consider a few things, but first, for daily news and politics, please click the subscribe button to stay notified. So I discussed the Q1 political donations on this channel when the results came out before, but I saw a question on social media earlier this week asking why it was that the Conservatives were still killing it on donations, whereas Reform UK were getting like half their value. Now, we don't know how the donations will continue to develop over this Parliament, but there is a reason why Conservative right-wing donors might want to dump more money into the Conservative Party than Reform UK. So when it comes to political donations, there are various reasons to give money to a political party, both honest and not so honest. But one of those reasons is to pragmatically donate to whichever of the two parties you prefer that could viably form a government at the next election to tip them over the line. In this way, it is not unusual to see Labour get more donations if they look like challenging strongly, like last year, while the Conservatives are in office, of course, or for the Conservatives to do better with donations if they look strong with Labour in office. But there is something a little different right now. Back in 1997, when the Tories had just been dumped into opposition for the first time in nearly 20 years, they struggled for donations. In fact, many years later, one of the reasons senior Conservatives from the time said that they struggled to rebuild was because they couldn't afford the researchers to hone their strategy. Well, the Conservatives have just been dumped into opposition again. They look even less likely to make a timely return to power than they did in 1997. So why are the Conservatives this time getting decent donations in a way they didn't seem to back then? One obvious reason is that many wealthy donors on the right wing do not want to see a Reform UK government. They've seen what Trump is doing in America. They know that Farage is quite open about wanting to replicate the experiment here in Britain. Despite what people may think, Trump's style of government is not good for any group in society, including the wealthy. Some individuals, possibly, but not an entire group. It's dreadful to those in poverty because he's crushing jobs, taking away what little affordable healthcare and help with food and schooling exists. It's not good for the middle classes because his policies are inflationary, driving up the cost of living, particularly for imports. It's not good for the business class because his tariffs are driving up the cost of importing essential materials and components. It's not good for investors because the USA is not seen as a reliable trading partner, and many companies are trapped between political pressure to base in America, but economic pressure to shift some production overseas. But there is one thing propping up the American economy, the almighty dollar. With a Reform UK government, everyone would face the same disastrous policies and consequences which are poisoning America, but with the added pitfall that the pound sterling is not too big to fall. We saw how fragile it is when Liz Truss announced her unfunded tax cuts. Now, yes, it was an economically illiterate mini-budget, but America has been pulling the same trick with way bigger deficits and getting away with it for years. Indeed, that's why Liz Truss thought she could get away with it. As far as she was concerned, she was just doing what American governments had been doing for years. They've just done it again. But when Truss tried it here on a much smaller scale, the arse fell out of the pound. Now Rachel Reeves is treading on eggshells for fear of spooking gilt investors. If Reform UK forms a government, they will destroy the pound. Just the announcement of their win could do it, but their first budget definitely would. This is not an appealing prospect for many wealthy donors, even firmly on the right wing of politics. Also consider the sort of government Reform UK would represent, not just in terms of policies, of which they have very few workable ones, but to form a government, they'd need to win well over 300 seats. So even with a few by-election wins between now and the election, they'd be exploding from literally single figures of MPs to a few hundred. The most experienced MP they'd have would be Lee Anderson. Almost all of them would be brand new. Regardless of how serious they are as a party or how well worked out their policies are, neither of which would be apparent, they would simply have no clue what they were doing. Now, sure, that could be a hidden blessing for those of us who consider the prospect of a reform government appalling, But it's a pretty good reason not to throw money at it if you're a UK-based donor, even on the right wing. Because it wouldn't just be a British MAGA. Trump didn't form his own party. He just infected an existing one. So although he and his team are largely clueless about their jobs, Congress is still packed full of experienced legislators to do his bidding. A Reform UK government wouldn't have the first clue how to get legislation passed. The House of Lords would be picking a lot of holes with it, and they don't have any members of the House of Lords. And if passed, it wouldn't take long for legal challengers to find even more flaws. And Farage, although he could do a lot of damage to our country, and absolutely would do, might not be able to go as quickly or as far as Trump is doing in America. In the USA, MAGA-aligned Republicans were already well established at all levels. In the Supreme Court, in Congress, various state legislatures, there hasn't actually been very much resistance to Trump at all, not from the institutions anyway. Some members of the public are putting up a fight. Farage would have a lot of the media on his side, sure, but that would be it. Our courts are independent. Removing that independence would be a tricky legislative process, not one that a few hundred people who've never produced legislation in their lives would be able to easily do. I remind you that Boris Johnson, in his 2019 manifesto, talked about removing the independence of our judiciary, but he wasn't able to do it. Possibly slowed down by COVID, but certainly blighted by the fact that his cabinet were idiots. But his party had experience in doing these things. Imagine Reform UK trying to do something legislatively complex without anyone knowing what to do. They'd all be going to Lee Anderson going, how do we write laws, Lee? Oh, no. Their first budget would, as I say, probably crash the pound, Liz Truss style. I'm not describing these things as a way to say, well, maybe it wouldn't be too bad, don't panic. No. It would be disastrous for the country. And just like anything that's disastrous for a country, the worst off would be hit hardest, always. Because although they may not have the brains to commit their major acts of evil, a government that does nothing is still incredibly damaging for the country. International trade is competitive, cutthroat. A G7 country suddenly having a government made up of childish greenhorns is going to get eaten up on the world stage. Investors would flee in their droves. We saw this in America with Trump's tariffs, but the sheer might of the American economy allowed the government to entice them back with climb downs. The UK does not have the same gravity to quickly reverse bad mistakes. It would be incredibly bad for many of the people who like to chuck money at the Conservatives. Not all, which is why Reform UK do have some donations. So although it might be surprising that people are still donating to the Conservatives, especially at the levels they are doing, despite their complete lack of any credible plan to return to government, rather than Reform UK, who could, it could just be that there are a lot of genuine Conservatives donating who see the danger in Reform UK and want to make sure they avoid it. And if you're wondering why donate at all then? Possibly because the best way for a right-wing donor to stop Reform UK is to donate to the Conservative Party. Reform UK have won the vast majority of their support from the Conservatives. To defeat Reform UK, it's not enough for Labour to do better. The Conservatives must also take some of those votes back. There have been a lot of votes Reform UK have, which Labour have no serious chance of ever winning. They never were Labour, they never will be. Reform UK keep insisting that they aren't a Tory rebrand, yet just welcomed the latest in a very long line of Tory defections this week. And the bulk of their support is from former Conservative support. They are absolutely the party for disaffected Conservative voters. So although we'll need to wait to see how the donation patterns play out long term, there is absolutely logic in wealthy donors funneling money into the Conservative Party, even though the Conservatives are not looking like mounting a strong challenge for government anytime soon. The prospect of Reform UK government could be so ruinous to even wealthy people that it could be worth donating to the Conservatives, even if it only results in a modest proportion of Reform UK votes returning. Even for many people on the right, a Reform UK government would be the stuff of nightmares. But let me know what you think in the comments below. For more content, you could subscribe to the channel or even join for access to streams and behind the scenes updates. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.